Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my February wrap up. So the month of February was actually my best booktube month ever in terms of quantity read, and what I have discovered over February is that having a daily page goal really helps me, and so I am going to be implementing that in the future. So essentially what I did was I added up all of the pages in my TBR and I divided them by the number of days, and I got, I think it was 137 pages per day. So then I aimed for 150. Because of this constant goal and for me to be pushing myself to be reading that many pages per day, it actually turned out that it was pretty easy for me to achieve that amount without like speeding through or feeling like I was giving up doing other things to be able to read those pages. But what I do feel that it did was really motivate me and made sure that I got through all of my TBR. So essentially we had a very successful reading month, and it seems like we're gonna have some more because I'm gonna be carrying on doing that. So I read a total of 9 books in February, and because of that I have already done a mid-month wrap up. So if you would like to see what I thought of any of these books, we have Forever by Maggie Stiefvater, A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tara Murphy, Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Then I will leave a link in the card to the mid-month wrap up where I talk extensively about these 5 books. So today's video is just going to consist of the last 4 books that I read in the month of February. However, I did not include any stats in my mid-month wrap up. So first of all, we will go through my monthly reading stats. So in the month of February, I read 3,659 pages, which broke down to an average of 130 pages per day. For the star ratings, I had 2 2-star reads, 3 4-star reads, and 4 5-star reads, which is an average of 4 stars overall. For the demographics, I read 5 young adult books and 4 adult books. And for the formats, every book that I read this month was a normal physical standard novel. The genres were very varied this month. I read 2 fantasy, 2 contemporary, 2 paranormal, 1 historical fiction, 1 dystopian, and 1 science fiction. And for the new statistic, which is where I sourced these books from, 8 of them were from my pre-existing TBR from before the start of 2019, and 1 was a library book. Now I know from this new statistic that it may look that over the last couple of months I've wasted my money on my Scribd subscription, so I would like to point out that at least 2 of the books that I read this month I read partially on Scribd and partially in physical form. Scribd works really well for me because I tend to use the ebook library more than the audiobook library, so that I can pull up a book when I'm waiting at the doctor's office or at the dentist or I'm unexpectedly in a queue. I could pull up a book on my phone and continue from where I left off in my physical copy. Getting into the books, the 6th book that I read in February was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is a reread for me, and as I'm sure you all know, this follows a girl called Katniss who is from District 12 of a dystopian America, and she lives in this world where all of the districts are kind of in poverty and in servitude to the capital. And once a year the capital hosts the Hunger Games, which is where they put 24 teenagers into an arena and they have to fight to the death. Like I said, this was a reread for me, and I have to say I didn't love it. I did give it a 4 stars because that was my original rating, and as I read this book at the time that it was more relevant to me, I was the age that this book was marketed at, I felt like my original rating was a more accurate representation of the book than me reading it now as a 25-year-old. So I did leave my rating at 4 stars, but essentially I thought that this book was very, very simply written, a lot more simply than I remembered it being. There's like no frills, no description, and it's very straight to the point and kind of bland. Another thing that I really noticed in this, and this is not why I didn't like it too much, though it kind of partially is, over the years I have noticed that a lot of people have been saying that they think that Katniss may be asexual. And when I've been hearing these things, like I couldn't really comment, like I don't remember any clear asexual hints, but then at the time that I read this I didn't know what asexuality was. But I have to say that reading this now, I am also on the team of Katniss being asexual. She has no romantic interest towards either of the 2 potential love interests in this book, and essentially any romantic connection that she tries to form with either of them is either advantageous to her position that she is currently in at the moment, or she is thinking about it as a sense of obligation, things that she should feel and wishes that she felt, as opposed to things that she actually does feel. Because of that, the main romance in this book, I don't know why I'm being so vague, like most of you guys know the storyline of this, but the main romance storyline in this book was extremely lacking chemistry. There was actually nothing there and it felt so forced. On one side of the romance it is quite genuine, but I didn't feel that. I didn't feel anything from the romance, and it was really tedious and like made my eyes roll, because I felt like this was a story that really did not need any romance, especially if it was going to be so poorly done. By the end of the series, like, it is not confirmed at all that Katniss is asexual, therefore having a romance in this really is entirely pointless. The next book that I read in February was Dead Until Dark by Charlene Harris. This is the first book in the Sookie Stackhouse series. This follows a girl in, I believe, Louisiana called Sookie, who is desperate to meet a vampire. She works at a bar and she has this ability to read people's minds, although she doesn't know why. Now this is at its core I would say it's a paranormal romance, but there are aspects of mystery in it, although I have noticed with the paranormal genre that tends to be the norm, especially in adult books that have very long series like this one does. I gave this 2 stars overall because I just didn't think that it was very well written. I know a lot of you guys love this series, and because of that I am going to be continuing, and I didn't actually expect this book to be very good, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt and continue on with the series. Some of you guys have told me as well that I have to persevere with the love interest in this book, which, like, he is, oh god, he's like cardboard, you know, like he has no personality and he doesn't really do it for me. But apparently if I persevere there will be a better love interest coming in the future, and I am willing to do that, because what I want from this book is I want it to be kind of trashy and addictive. I'm not expecting a great work of literature, but I am expecting it to be kind of well written. And you know, a book doesn't have to be good. A book can be kind of ridiculous as long as it's like fun, but there are just some elements of writing that I feel are necessary because I'm not a person who can easily suspend my disbelief. So essentially my main problem with the writing of this book is that things would just pop up in the story and they were not backed up at any point. You are just kind of expected to believe that this is the way that things are, even though they are things that haven't been mentioned before, and they are things that the main character just accepts as though they're not strange, even though they kind of are. Now I have been told in the comments of my vlog that there is a reason for some of these ridiculous things that I mentioned in my vlog. I will link that vlog in the cards if you would like to check it out, because I do go on like a bit of a rant and go into kind of all of the things that I really found ridiculous about this. People have been putting in the comments things like, oh, these things that you're saying are bad writing, they're not, they are explained later on in the series. And I do understand leaving clues in an early book to things that happen later in the series to create an element of suspense to keep the reader reading and to provide a bit of mystery to compel the reader to continue with the series. However, as the main character Sookie does not question any of these things, it does not build suspense and it is not a mystery. So because the main character does not question what is going on, it leads the reader to believe that there is nothing to be questioned and that these things are just accepted. That is why I personally think that it is bad writing as opposed to relevant things that are coming in later in the series, because yes, they may be explained later in the series, but the way that they were laid out in this book does not make me even think that they are a mystery that is going to be solved. But like I said, I will continue with the series as you guys love it so much, and when we have really long series like this, I find that the first book is normally not very good anyway, so I'm definitely willing to continue. Next, I read one of the worst books I've ever had the displeasure of reading, and that was Changeling by Philippa Gregory. Now I have some issues with this book. So Changeling is a young adult historical fiction that likes to market itself as a fantasy when it's not, and it follows a boy who was given to a monastery at a young age because he is an orphan who has a certain curiosity for things, and so he is picked up by this religious order and given the task of going to places where the devil's work is evident and dealing the punishment of God. It also follows a girl who is set to inherit the castle that she lives in when her father dies. However, when her father does die, her brother has other ideas and says that she can marry this disgusting, repulsive guy, or she can be the abbess at the local abbey. And she obviously chooses to be the abbess, and this guy is sent to investigate some strange things that are happening there, and that is how our two main characters meet. Now my problem with this book straight off is that in the dust jacket it says dark magic, werewolves and madness, but there is no dark magic, werewolves or madness in this. This is essentially a historical fiction surrounding the religious history of Italy in the 15th century, and it contains things that are explained by mundane reasons that people in the 15th century thought were works of witches or the devil. So I was kind of annoyed about that because a lot of people on Goodreads had shelved it as fantasy, and it literally has zero fantasy elements. And my other problem with this is that it was really boring and it was also really repetitive. Now, I don't read historical fiction because I generally don't like it and I do find it boring. So as soon as I found out that there were no fantastical elements, I did kind of expect that I was just not going to get on board with this book, and it proved correct, and I gave this book 1.5 stars. I really actually don't have that much to say about it, which you may think is strange, just seems like I gave it such a low rating. But it's not that I hated it or anything, I was just so completely disinterested. And essentially I didn't want to give it 1 star because I don't have a burning hatred for this book, but at the same time I rated Dead Until Dark 2 stars, and that was definitely a lot better on my enjoyment level than this one was, so I didn't feel like I could rate it 2 either. And safe to say, I don't think I'm going to be reading anything else by Philippa Gregory. Historical fiction is still not for me unless it has something just a little bit different about it. And yeah, like, I should have known. All the times I've had this, I should have known that I just wasn't going to enjoy it. And the last book that I read in February was An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. I gave this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. So this book is an adult urban fantasy that follows magicians in New York City, and every 20 years or so there is a turning, which is when all of the magical houses come together and fight for the right to party. They fight for the right to rule the unseen world, which is like the supernatural magician world. Essentially, the houses in this world do not have to be familial, and some of them are actual physical houses that have magical powers that have been bestowed on them by the people that live there. So traditionally, you have the heads of the houses who will either have somebody from the family participate in the tournament, or will get a champion to come in. You also have people who are hoping to found their own houses as a result of the tournament, and you also have people coming in from outside the unseen world to stand as champions. So there was a reason that I thought I wasn't going to like this book, and that is that you are literally just thrown into the world and things are revealed along the way as you get further into the book. And as I've discussed in this video and many other videos, suspending my disbelief is something that I'm just not good at. However, I think because I knew going into this that nothing would kind of be explained and I'd be a little bit lost, and I knew that everything would come together at the end. I really enjoyed this book. I really loved it. I thought it was amazing. I loved the atmosphere and the extravagance and opulence of the magic. I thought that each character was well developed, even though this is a very short book and it was intended as a standalone. There is a sequel coming out next year, but at the time it was written, it was intended to be a standalone. So you have a lot of character development. Each character has his own voice. There's many different plot lines weaving through here, and one thing that I liked the most about this book is the way that Kat Howard writes. So like I said, you go into this, you know absolutely nothing, but the more you go through, you will sort of get to a point where you can guess a reveal, and then a few pages later or a few chapters later you will have like confirmation on the page of that reveal. So what I really liked is how Kat Howard gives you a chance to figure it out for yourself, and then like you get immediate gratification as it's revealed not too long afterwards. So I thought this was absolutely amazing. I'm like thoroughly shook at how much I love this. I did give it 5 stars, and I'm not sure if that is like my 100% accurate rating. It would be somewhere between 4 and 5. I don't feel like this is like my new favorite book, while I absolutely loved it. And normally I would give it a 4.5 stars because of that, but I literally don't have anything negative to say about it. So I felt it would be unfair to give it anything less than 5 stars. So that is everything for my February wrap up. I hope you all also had awesome reading months. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I read in February. Please also don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.